Hi there. Welcome to the Ian McNaughton Show. My name is Ian McNaughton. Thank you for joining me. I'm got a busy show on the way for you. I'm going to be discussing Formula One. I'll be talking about some rugby. I'm going to first talk about my weekend. It's been a busy weekend here. I'm recording this on Monday, September 13th. Went golfing with my buddy Jevin Lefebvre on Left Side Heavy podcast. Shout out to Jev for inviting me out to Carnoustie and Poco to go golfing. Big fun happening there. I shot a 124. Not great. Not great. One of my lower scores in a while. But, I was new to the course, figuring out the different greens, figuring out the weather conditions. It was a feeling out process for 18 holes is really what it was. I actually got one par. I think I had a couple of good drives, but I was just topping everything. I wasn't even chunking anything. I was just topping everything and basically extra 3 or 4 shots on every hole because I was just topping everything. So that wasn't great. Covered the Everett Silvertips preseason tournament virtually this past weekend. That was really fun. Silvertips went 1-2. They got the big win over Spokane on Friday. They lost to Tri-City on Saturday and Portland on Sunday. That's not great, but there's still plenty of time. That's why there's a preseason. You're just figuring out stuff. You're trying to get better. Watch football for most of Sunday. Caught the Seahawks game against the Indianapolis Colts. I was really impressed with that game with the Seahawks. They looked like they were just having a lot of fun, controlling the edge mostly. They beat the Indianapolis Colts 28-16. They controlled the edge. They looked like they were dominating them on the offensive line and the defensive line. Just at the line of scrimmage, it looked like Seattle was dominating them. Russell Wilson was just fantastic. 2 touchdowns to Tyler Lockett, 1 to Gerald Everett, a final 1 to DK Metcalf. Just a solid performance all around. I thought my takeaway on Carson Wentz, I thought he was fine. I didn't think he was great. He's still, I think, getting used to it. He was injured for a bit. He didn't look comfortable at points. He looked extremely uncomfortable quite a bit in the third quarter, going near the end of the game. He managed to complete some passes because it was garbage time, but just tough look for Carson Wentz. I think the Colts are fine. I think they were also disappointed because I think that was a game they thought they were going to win. Indianapolis thought they were going to win that game. They thought they had the Seahawks just nailed down, and they didn't. They were not prepared for what Seattle was throwing at them, literally on offense and at the edge. Rasheem Green had a really good game. Darrell Taylor had a couple of important plays. Monet had a really good game. Puna Ford, he got injured at one point, but he was able to make an impact at the line of scrimmage. Just a fun game as a Seahawks fan to watch because I felt like a bit of an old school Seahawks game, like a Legion of Boom type game where they were in control. The quarterback was flustered, and there was just nothing the other team could do about it. Seattle was just dominating and taking control. I watched the Steelers Bills a little bit on Sunday morning. Josh Allen, man, that was a bit of a tough performance there. That seemed like a guy who knew that he was really good, and he wanted to play like a video game style, but none of his other teammates were playing like a video game style. I can't tell you how many times when I just turned on the game and a Bills offensive lineman was getting a holding call, or Allen was scrambling trying to make a play, and somebody didn't catch it or wasn't going to be a first down anyways. It's a tough watch for somebody with Josh Allen in one of his fantasy leagues. Not great, but impressive job by the Steelers. We'll see if they can hold on. Maybe they're going to go for another early season run like they did last year. I'm curious to see how Big Ben lasts over the course of the season. He was good on Sunday, I thought. Not great. He had some fine plays. Couple bad throws. But I thought he was good for the most part. Got the ball to receivers where needed. The final game I watched Sunday morning, Vikings Bengals. And boy, when they switched over from the Seahawks Colts game to the Vikings Bengals game, definitely a difference. I noticed was definitely not as exciting offensively. Both teams were playing pretty conservative because they were just at the end of the fourth quarter going into overtime and it was tied and neither team wanted to make a mistake. But the Vikings made a mistake in overtime, and the Bengals won. I thought Jamar Chase had a really good game, 4 yards. I think he had 4 catches, 100 yards, a touchdown. I think he's getting ready. I think there's a bit of that, a bit of that stuff that was mentioned about him in the preseason was a bit overblown. The Bengals are a team that's still rebuilding. They're still growing. They got a young quarterback. They're trying to figure all this out. I think they're in a really good spot. The Vikings, on the other hand, are a team I'm worried about. That's a team that seems to have already a fragile relationship with the quarterback and the coach, and coach to the rest of the team to a certain extent. So I don't know how that's going to go. Maybe Zimmer, gets canned at the end of the year, before the end of the year, if things really go bad. I hope not. I think he's a good coach. I don't think he should be fired for something that his quarterback can or can't do. So we'll see about that. Big positive grades for the Bengals, for the Seahawks. Not really high grades for this. I think both the Steelers and the Bills probably get B's and C's. C- for the Vikings, because at least they got overtime. I saw some of the Sunday afternoon games. Green Bay, New Orleans, which is an absolute disaster because I have Aaron Rodgers in one of my fantasy leagues, and I am only up by like 1.5 or something, and the other guy's got Lamar Jackson playing tonight, so I needed Aaron Rodgers to do well or Lamar Jackson to perform poorly on Monday night. But man, those Saints teams, they just frustrated the hell out of the Packers. They were just so good. Sticky coverage, man coverage, pressuring the offensive line of the Packers, and Aaron Rodgers just had nothing to show for it. Outstanding job by New Orleans. Green Bay had nothing on defense to slow down Jameis Winston, which was a little bit surprising. And the Saints were just dominating them from start to finish. So kudos to the Saints for the win. Tough luck for the Packers. I like to think there's better performances coming down the road. They have a Monday night game with Detroit in week 3 that they should be able to win. If they aren't doing well by week 3 against Detroit, then I'd be concerned. Cleveland and Kansas City was a fun game. I thought the Browns were going to win. Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb just doing their best to upset the Chiefs. It didn't work out in the end because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, and he just made a bunch of great throws, bunch of great plays. Not surprising. That's a tough loss for the Browns. That's a game they probably thought they were going to lose, but you really wanted to win that, being up 12. I think at one point they were even more. So a tough finish for the Browns. That also just proves how good the Chiefs are as a team. They're just so good. And then Dolphins and Patriots, I watched a bit of as well. I think that game went about as expected. I think most people thought it was going to be a tight, close game with not a lot of scoring, really good defense. Special teams is going to have an impact. And the Dolphins got away with a win. I thought both quarterbacks looked good. I thought Mac Jones looked good in his first game. His offensive line struggled a little bit. I thought Tua looked good outside of a really bad interception near the end. That game was about what we expected. And I think there's, room for improvement from both sides. I don't think week 1, really represents who you are as a team. Look at the Packers, look at the Colts. I don't think that's really who they are. But same can be said for New England and Miami. I think both teams are arguably wild card teams. And they didn't quite look like that Sunday, but they will down the road. Bears and Rams were in the Sunday night game. Speaking of a team with a poor offensive line, good Lord, the Bears had a really Bearsy game. Their offensive line, I thought, struggled, and that's why you put in Andy Dalton instead of Justin Fields. I like Justin Fields. I'm really high on him. I think he maybe start in week 5 or 6 when maybe the offensive line has a bit more chemistry. But last night against the Rams at SoFi Stadium, that was not the place to put Fields in. That was the place you start Andy Dalton. I didn't like the going back and forth. I thought if you had a guy, you stick with him. Don't go back and forth. But, Dalton was, again, what you expected. He was fine for about 3/4 of it. The Rams were really good. The Rams were fantastic. Matt Stafford, I think, was operating about 85% capacity of how well he can actually play. The Rams defense, they really pressured Andy Dalton and the Bears offense. Rams secondary looked really good. So that game went, again, about as expected. The Rams completely dominated the Bears. Not completely dominated, but they were in control, leading the whole thing. The momentum was in the Rams' favor from start to finish, and I think that's what we expected. So otherwise, yeah, it was a really good weekend, really fun weekend. I got a busy couple weekends coming up covering some rugby sevens in Vancouver and hopefully Edmonton. So with that being said, let's get on with the rest of the show. You can hear me discuss about Formula One and my Ian review sports for the 2021 Italian Grand Prix. And you can also hear my recap of the weekend rugby wise. Canada played the US in a 2023 Rugby World Cup qualifying series. Leg 2 was this past weekend. I also discussed the rugby championship between New Zealand, Argentina, Australia, and South Africa. Bunch of great stuff. Stay tuned for more. Thank you again for listening. Let's get on with the show. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ian McNaughton, Big E here. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I'm going to be doing Ian Review Sports, this time for the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, which took place on Sunday in Monza. I'm going to go through my takeaways, my thoughts on the race winner, which was Daniel Ricciardo, and even talk a little bit about spring qualifying. So without further ado, let's get into it. Daniel Ricciardo wins the 2021 Italian Grand Prix in his McLaren. It was a great race from start to finish. It's his first win since 2018. First double podium for McLaren since 2014. First race win for McLaren since 2011. And their first 1-2 since 2010. So all in all, this was the big McLaren weekend. Team Papaya, as Ricardo mentioned, with Lando Norris finishing second, Ricardo finishing first. Lando got his best career finish this past weekend. So all in all, a successful and outstanding weekend for McLaren F1. They needed a day like this because of how badly things went last week at the Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort. They were not qualifying well. I believe Ricardo finished 9th and Norris finished 10th, or vice versa. Was not great last week in Zandvoort. This week, they come back with a 1-2, just what the doctor ordered. They are now up on Ferrari, 215 points to 201.5 in a constructors title. McLaren has 1 win, 5 podiums. Ferrari has no wins, 3 podiums. That's the 3-4 battle in the constructors championship right now. Driver standings. Valtteri Bottas is now in 3rd. He's got 141 points with no wins, 8 podiums. Norris is 132 points, no wins, 4 podiums. Ricardo is 8th with 83 points, 1 win, 1 podium. Sainz has 97.5 points with 2 podiums. Leclerc has 104 points with 1 podium. He's in 6th. So it's Mercedes 3 in the Drivers' Championship. Mercedes 3 with Bottas. Norris is 4th with McLaren. Leclerc is 6th with Ferrari. Sainz is 7th with Ferrari, and Ricardo is 8th with McLaren. I think there's a lot of lessons we can take away from this race. The big one is never quit, be patient, take your own way, bet on yourself, that kind of thing. Where Ricardo made the bold decision to leave Red Bull and to go to Renault in 2019, and I know Ricardo got a lot of flack from going from one of the best teams in Formula One to Renault. I get that. I'm sure everybody, even Lewis Hamilton, will get flack for doing something like that. But it's kind of like an analogy I heard from Colin Cowherd. That's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with the Colin Cowherd analogy, where just because something is not good, something is bad, does not mean that you should give up and that you should stop doing it. He used the analogy of like Star Wars movies. Just because these Star Wars movies are bad doesn't mean we should stop making Star Wars movies, because then we're never going to get good Star Wars movies again if we just stop making them. Or like the Los Angeles Lakers, where the Lakers, shouldn't stop fielding a basketball team because, oh, we're not good anymore, because then you're not going to win a championship if you just give up and you just fool the team. So that's my feeling with Ricardo, is just because you might not be good now doesn't mean you should give up, or that you should quit F1, or that you shouldn't be trying. You should always be, trying your best, because one day it will pay off. It will work out. You will be successful. And this weekend, Ricardo was successful. Again, you're going to get a lot of negativity along the way. He's faced his fair share of it. But I mean, if you believe this is the best thing to do for your career, if Ricardo thinks that going to Renault from Red Bull is the best thing to do for his career, go for it. There's nothing wrong with taking a risk that you think is worth doing. Nothing wrong with that. It might not go the way you thought it would, but there's nothing wrong with at least trying to, take a risk and do something different. And the other thing that I've noticed with Ricardo is that he's had a lot of fun along the way. I know, 2019 with Renault wasn't great. He finished ninth in a driver's championship. Finished fifth last year with Renault. Not great. I'm sure they wanted to go, further up the, rankings. They wanted to do more than just fifth and ninth in drivers championship. But, he's had a lot of fun along the way. He's really enjoyed what he's doing and the career he's in. And I think that's something that everybody should be taking note of, is the fact that this guy, he goes to work every day. He seems to enjoy it. He has a lot of fun. He's a really personable guy. And I wish there were more Daniel Ricciardos in the world, but that's just how it is. Not everybody's going to be as happy and joyous and, nice to be around as he is. That's what makes this win so big, because he's one of the nicest, upbeat, positive guys in Formula One, and he gets the win. He also might be better than we think. I got an article coming out soon for speakyourpiece.ca on my F1 driver rankings. If I had to build a team, which drivers would I want talent-wise, 1 through 25? I'm doing 25 drivers. And Ricardo I have in the top 10. I think I even have him close to the top 5. Which, some people are like, you sure? Is he really that good? He hasn't really done anything the last few years. It's like, yeah, I think he's really good. I think he's really talented. He's a little bit on the older side, I believe, at about 31 right now. But he's really talented. He's really good. He's a, impressive driver. He showed why this past weekend. Not only just in the race, but in the sprint qualifying, in real qualifying. I think he's a really talented driver. Maybe just this weekend was his, bread and butter at Monza, but I think he's a really talented driver. And sometimes I think we're selling him short on how talented he actually is. And good on Lando for being a real team sport. I know he wanted to win that race yesterday. Like anybody, you want to win anytime you can, go for the win. But, there's nothing wrong with second place either, especially when your teammate gets the win. Nothing wrong with second place. And like you said, he'll have chances down the road. He'll have opportunities in the future to win races. So hopefully he can, pull it off. He can make it happen. We'll see. Those are kind of my big lessons, my big takeaways from Ricardo winning. Of course. The next thing I want to discuss is the Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton crash on lap 26. Obviously, I have to mention that. Lewis pits on lap 26. He has a 4.2 second pit stop. Max pits on lap 23, I believe it was, and he had an 11-second pit stop. Really bad. The 4.2 is not great, but the 11-second is awful. As Verstappen comes down the straight, Lewis is exiting pit lane. Max sets a fastest lap time of 1:25, 173. So he's got the fastest lap time as Hamilton's coming out the pits. It's a really good lap from Max coming down the straight. Hamilton comes out ahead of Verstappen. Hamilton gives Verstappen a little space around turn 1 and 2. He gives him a little bit of space. He is still ahead. Verstappen never gets equal to or ahead of Lewis, resulting in a massive crash, which saw Verstappen's car on top of Hamilton's as Max was trying to get around on the inside, from the outside to the inside. Lewis gave him a little bit of space, not really, not a ton, a little bit. But as a result, Max's car went over the sausage curb, hopped up onto the top of Lewis's car. Both men had to retire from the race. Personally, I classified it as a racing incident. Verstappen faces a 3-place grid penalty for his actions for trying to get in on Lewis and not backing out. So now Verstappen, wherever he finishes in qualifying in Sochi, he'll have to start 3 places behind there. And I thought this was more of a racing incident than what we saw at Silverstone this year, where Hamilton was assessed a 10-second penalty for his involvement in his role in the crash, where Verstappen turns in on him. Verstappen has the line. Hamilton doesn't really have the line. And it's similar to the lap 1 incident earlier in this race, where Hamilton and Verstappen were fighting for space. And then going into turn 4 and 5, the next chicane, Verstappen just pushes Hamilton out of the way. Hamilton doesn't have any space, and he has to go over the sausage curves. It's not as extreme damage-wise, where he's not on top of somebody's car. He's just driving over curbs. So that, I think had a role and an impact in this crash. And that was considered a racing incident on lap 1. So I think if you're comparing incidences, where in Silverstone, I think it was a racing incident. I don't think any driver really should have been punished for that. I think turn 1 or lap 1, turn 4 and 5 earlier in this race, that was a racing incident. And I think this was also a racing incident. I don't think Verstappen should be getting a 3-place grid penalty for causing this accident. I think both drivers are responsible for it. I think it's really also tough to tell a driver in the thick of a driver's championship race, hey, back out. You'll get them next time, because there isn't a lot of next times in Formula One, especially when you just set your fastest lap. You're not going to get many more opportunities after this to pass somebody. Overall, I don't think this changes much in the drivers' championship, if we're being completely honest. Both drivers are in their own league. Like, they're ahead of everybody else, so far ahead of everyone else that this doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Losing ground per se is not a concern. Red Bull might be more content with the result than Mercedes, considering that the Mercedes car and pit crew I thought were better on Sunday than Red Bull were. And Red Bull is behind in the Constructors' Championship, but Verstappen still leads the Drivers' Championship. For the Constructors this weekend, it'll hurt a little bit with Perez also getting his penalty. So the Drivers' Championship, this is an okay result for Verstappen. In the grand scheme of things for Red Bull, it's not great for the Constructors' title. So in conclusion, I thought this was a racing incident. I don't think anybody should have been punished for this. I don't see how Verstappen gets a 3-place grid penalty. The other problem is just the extreme result of this incident, where we have a car on top of another car, where you don't see that very often. It very rarely happens. I wonder if we sometimes overreact because we have something like that happen, where we don't usually have that happen. We hardly ever see a car on top of one another. But when a car is on top of a car, we feel the need to do something, especially with the FIA and Formula One, to talk about safety. We talk about safety and trying to protect drivers. Well, that's safety and protecting drivers. So maybe Verstappen will know better for next time. I don't know. I just think that's unfair for him that he gets a 3-place grid penalty. I don't know how this will impact the rest of the season. Again, it's really tough to tell a driver in the thick of the championship race, hey, back off. Hey, slow down. Hey, give way. Like, good luck. Good luck. I can't imagine doing that, but I guess that's the closest thing you could do to say, hey, slow down or back off or give some space. Lewis, I think, was fine in that. I don't think he had to give room. He gave him a little room. He didn't have to. He didn't get room in turn one. That's fine. If that's how we're going to race, that's how we're going to race. That's what we're doing today. That's what we're doing today. So, speaking of Mercedes drivers, Valtteri Bottas finishes third after starting last. He finished first in sprint qualifying, which I'll discuss more later on. However, he started last due to exceeding his quota of engines for this year. So he got a new engine on Sunday. He started 19th as a result, finished third, and added 15 points to his driver championship total. I think the best part about his race, he had a tremendous race. This was a Sergio Perez-like recovery from Bottas. I think the best part of the race, though, was in the post-race interview when David Coulthard was interviewing him, and they had the Verstappen Hamilton crash on the background, and David asked, Valtteri, what did you think of the crash? And he's just like, yeah, unfortunate accident. Like, just shrugged his shoulders, like, yeah, I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy in a way. His face really said it all. I thought it was great. So I was wondering coming into this race about Russell and Bottas and what their compete level, what their competitiveness was going to be like this weekend, since we already know where their seats will be next year, where they're going to be driving next year. With Russell going to Mercedes, Bottas going to Alfa Romeo. And they both really impressed me, especially Bottas. I thought Bottas was really impressive. He drove the hell out of that car, going from 19th to 3rd. Excellent job by Valtteri Bottas. Well done. He deserves 3rd place. Kudos to him. And then it was a bad weekend for AlphaTauri. Speaking of, Bottas started 19th, and that was because of Yuki Tsunoda not starting. It was just an all-around awful weekend for AlphaTauri. Yuki didn't start due to an issue with its brakes. Pierre Gasly completed 3 laps before retiring due to a suspension problem. This comes after retiring in the first lap of the sprint race because of a crash and some damage that Gasly suffered. He then received a 5-place grid penalty for an unscheduled gearbox change after sprint qualifying. He then was required to start from the back of the grid because he exceeded his quota of power units. And then finally started from pit lane because of a new energy store specification. So pretty much what happened with Gasly's car from sprint qualifying to the race on Sunday. So from Saturday to Sunday, fitted a new internal combustion engine, turbocharger, MGUH, and MGUK, control electronics, and energy store. So they pretty much gave him not quite a new car, but close to a new car with all of the new additions to it. And none of it mattered. Both cars were not prepared. They weren't ready. Yuki was, it's unfortunate because he got into the slight, not crash, but he bumped into Robert Kubica on Saturday. Tough luck for Yuki. Gasly had to crash. Couldn't even, 3 laps was too much for it. So his car was not ready. And now they're behind Alpine in the constructors title. So not great if you're AlphaTauri. Hopefully they can pick it up and improve in the next couple of races because they would love a top 5 finish in the constructors championship. For the rest of the field, it was an up and down day. Leclerc finished 4th. The Sainz finished 6th. Leclerc is 6.5 points up on Sainz. I mentioned that earlier. Ferrari is 13.5 points behind McLaren. Fine day for Ferrari. I thought Leclerc was going to finish a little bit higher, but it didn't turn out that way. Sainz was never really in the thick of it. He was staying back quite a bit. 6 is a good finish for him. Stroll finishes 7th. Vettel finishes 12th for Aston Martin. I don't think I heard Stroll's name mentioned once on the broadcast on the main feed. I don't think I heard Stroll's name mentioned once. Vettel had the tap with Ocon on lap 15. So nothing really exciting from Aston Martin throughout the race. Alonso finishes 8th. Ocon finishes 10th for Alpine. Double points finish for them. Again, I can't think of a memorable moment involving Fernando Alonso. The Ocon bump with Vettel, I guess, is somewhat memorable, but nothing really exciting with Alpine. George Russell finishes ninth. Latifi finishes 11th for Williams, so just outside of a points finish for Williams. That kind of feels like in the future who they're going to be, like Williams and Alpine. That kind of feels like a bit of a rivalry down the road. Once Williams can start, being competitive once again, getting a better car, possibly better drivers, that feels like a rivalry down the road for me. I don't know why. I just have a hunch, just have a feeling, really. Remarkable day for Russell, who finishes ninth after starting 14th. Latifi finished ahead of Vettel, which he's done that 4 times this year. He did it in Italy. He did it in Hungary, Great Britain, the first Austria race. I thought that was interesting. 4 times this year, Nicholas Latifi has finished ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Antonio Giovinazzi finishes 13th. Robert Kubica finishes 14th. Gio went off the track at turn 5 on lap 1, made contact with Sainz coming back onto the track, and he spun. So as a result, Gio got a 5-second penalty. He's really struggling to inspire me with Alfa Romeo. It'll be interesting to see what his prospects are returning to Alfa next season. Robert Kubica, I mean, he's been average in his return. He's replaced Kimi because Kimi's been dealing with COVID for the last 2 weeks. So I don't know. I guess I don't think, Kubica is going to be getting a starting gig in Formula One anytime soon again. Maybe he's trying to race for a job. Who knows? Alfa Romeo's in a really interesting position, especially now with Bottas coming in next season. Mick Schumacher finishes 15th. Nikita Mazepin retired from the race. Mazepin spun because, of course, he did. He also retired due to a power unit failure. Solid race for Mick Schumacher. He got spun by Mazepin. They made contact early on in the race, and then Mick recovered, and he got 15th, so good for him. Sergio Perez finished 5th for Red Bull after starting 8th. He got as high as 3rd, but due to a 5-second penalty, he finished 5th. And I thought it was a fair penalty. He left the track. He gained a lasting advantage against Leclerc. Fair enough. 5-second penalty. He's in 5th. Not the end of the world. I get that. That makes sense. Sprint qualifying, I wanted to touch on that a little bit. I think you have to make it 3 laps. No more than 3 laps, because nobody's interested in a 100-kilometer sprint race. No, it doesn't do anything for me. It was boring by the end of it. Fairly interesting in the beginning, but that's about it. I think you make it 3 laps or less. Make it just 1 lap, maybe. Who knows? No one needs the 100-kilometer race on a Saturday. And I get that we're not doing the sprint race every weekend. It's just this didn't really do much for myself. Listen, I think there is something there with sprint qualifying. I think there is something there. Like, you can make it something. I just think 100 kilometers or whatever, 20 laps, 15 laps, whatever it was, too many laps, cut it into like 3, and you got sprint qualifying. And that's it. That's how you do it. Let me know what you guys think. That's Ian Reviews Sports on a 2021 Italian Grand Prix. We're off this week from Formula One, but we got a bunch of rugby we're covering. Be sure to stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back with more stuff later on this week. Thanks again for watching. Peace out. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ian McNaughton. This is Ian Reviews Sports, International Rugby Edition. I'm going to be talking about USA Canada. I'm going to be discussing some of the rugby championship. So let's get into it. First, the big game for myself this weekend. The United States beats Canada 38-16 in the second leg of their 2023 Rugby World Cup qualifying series. The U.S. will now play Uruguay for the America's 1 spot at the 2023 Rugby World Cup, October 2nd and 9th. They had the points advantage over Canada, so as a result, the U.S. is moving on. Canada will now be playing Chile October 2nd and October 9th, with the winner playing the loser of USA-Uruguay. So whoever loses the series between USA and Uruguay, they'll play Canada for the Americas 2 spot. So essentially, it's a North America 1 versus South America 1. That's the US and Uruguay. And then whoever wins gets America 1. And then the loser falls back to place Canada, likely Canada, unless Chile wins, likely Canada for the America 2 spot. The U.S. should beat Uruguay. They are separated by 1 spot in the world rankings. The U.S. is ranked 16th in the world. Uruguay is 17th. Canada is 21st in the world. Chile is 28th. Chile is behind Hong Kong, Russia, Namibia, etc. So that's what's happening in the Americas side of the Rugby World Cup for 2023 qualifying. In the Rugby Championship, New Zealand beat Argentina 39-0. Bowden Barrett, he got 1 conversion, 1-for-1 in pens. He's trying to earn that fly half spot for the All Blacks team in the upcoming World Cup. His brother Jordy Barrett, he got 3 conversions, nailed all of them, and 1 penalty. Anton Lunar Brown was named to start. He's a flanker, but withdrew due to a hamstring injury. And Gonzalo Garcia, he's one of the scrum halves for Argentina. He made his international debut on Sunday. So it's a significant win for New Zealand. And speaking of significant wins, the Wallabies defeat the Springboks 28-26. Quad Cooper scored the game-winning penalty in the 80th minute in injury time. He nailed all 7 of his penalties against the Springboks. He made the only conversion for Australia in the 17th minute. It's a tough game for Andre Pollard. He made just 1 conversion. He missed another one. He missed 2 penalties. That's a total of 8 points he left off the board for his Springboks team that they could have used against Australia. So it was a fairly full team for the Springboks, and they've had a busy summer considering they played the British Irish Lions 3 times. They played Georgia. They've had a full slate of games for most of the summer. They beat Argentina twice in the Rugby Championship, and now New Zealand are in control to win the Rugby Championship. They have 15 points with all 3 of their bonus points. The Springboks are 5 points back. Those 2 teams will meet in October, and rematches are going to be taking place once again this weekend in Brisbane between New Zealand, Argentina, and Australia and South Africa. So it's a busy weekend of rugby. Lots of 15s action happening on the men's side. There's going to be some women's action happening today, Monday, that I'm going to talk about later on this week. But be sure to check out our Rugby Sevens coverage. I will be at BC Place for the Canada Sevens, the first Canada Sevens event this year, excluding the Olympics. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll also be covering some of the men's games that goes on this weekend with the Rugby Championship as well. Thank you very much for watching. It's greatly appreciated. We'll be back again soon. Peace out.